Hey everyone, this is the distribution team demo for September 14th, 2020. And today I'll be talking about the new CLI that we've been building for the Orchestrator project. I figured since this is, as far as I know, this is our um, first big Go project for the distribution team. So we're going to walk through just the setup of it, some of the architectural decisions we've made, and then I'll show a demo of what we have working so far. All right, so on my screen here, let me make it a little bigger. We have the GitLab Orchestrator project. And so this CLI is actually part of the project. It's embedded in here in the CLI folder. There's a few reasons for this. One is just we're working towards releasing the CLI as an alpha pretty soon here. And the CLI is really just kind of, currently we have some bash scripts that run Ansible and Terraform code to stand up a cluster and then orchestrate it or provision it together. And the CLI is really tied to those Ansible and Terraform modules and playbooks. And so embedding it in the project seemed the least friction way. Thankfully, now you can do this with Go. Previously, I think before Go modules, about a year ago, you had to have everything in Go path source on your development workstation, which was kind of hard to embed Go programs into other programs. But now we have modules. So you can see here that this Go mod file basically just lists out our requirements. So one thing that we've done here is we followed the lead from other Go projects in GitLab. So specifically the GitLab runner project is pretty mature at this point, Go CLI, so we adopted a lot of their conventions instead of making our own. This should make it easier for other people across GitLab to be able to bootstrap into this project and understand what's going on and contribute as we go. We're using the same your fave CLI library that they are, Testify for testing things. So it was great to have an example GitLab runner project to kind of look to. I believe the Orchestrator CLI will still be simpler than the GitLab runner project, but as far as like organizing the source code and everything, it was great to have an example already. And this was part of this issue 277 that Mitch worked on, setting up all this. So there's a lot of discussion there. So the next, so the GitLab runner, the runner team actually set up this Go standards and style guidelines, which is a pretty beefy page here. Just about how to organize your code, how to write tests. There's a section specifically on CLIs, which is nice. And so we already have a lot of content here to, make sure that we're all doing Go the same way. And I expect we'll be able to contribute to this project as we go as well. One other thing that we've done for this project, and this is really something that Robert spearheaded, is to document our architecture decisions. There's this in the doc folder, there's this decisions subfolder that has some markdown files. And so in respect to this, what we've done so far, previously we had our CLI commands, documented out. We had meetings on it. And then as our understanding grew and we knew better what we needed, I guess, we were able to refine this to a simpler set of subcommands. And I think the neat thing about this is that this is all captured in this decision document, so you can kind of see the workflow that we've gone through as far as how we're thinking about it. So in the future, if we come back and are wondering why this is this way, we have a record to look to. Okay, so that's kind of the CLI at large. Next, I'll step into the init option. So this is also something that Mitch worked on. So the init command will pull down the Docker container that is also part of this project. And so really what we're doing is wrapping, putting Terraform and Ansible into a Docker container so users don't have to have the right version on their systems. This lets us really target specific versions of Terraform and Ansible instead of a range of versions that we might have to support. So there's still some conversation going on here about allowing people to use Terraform and Ansible installed locally on their systems. But I think for the kind of quick start or easiest to value user, you can just pull down the image and use that. So I will switch over to the code here and show that off. Let me make this a little bigger as well. Not that big. Okay, so here we are in the GitLab Orchestrator project on the right side of the screen here. I'm going to cd into the CLI subdirectory. I've got it open here as well. And so to build a CLI from here, we have a makefile, which is, has some standard Go stuff. One of the other nice things about Go modules is that it kind of transparently pulls in your dependencies for you. So previously you had to, if you were using something like dep or any number of like third-party dependency managers for Go, you would have to, like, if you were building the CLI in the container, you would have to first get dep, then you would have to use it to grab the dependencies, and then you would have to build the project. Whereas with modules, you just say go build and it'll fetch the dependencies if they're not always there. So that's really nice, especially when you're trying to keep down the steps of building the binary. So let's do that now. Just run make. And now you can see in the CLI subfolder, we have this Orchestrator binary. Since I'm on Mac, it built it for Mac. So let's pop open the help text for this. And we only have the init command so far, but I expect, we've done a lot of work setting up the project. And so adding new commands will be easier as we move forward. So if I run Orchestrator init -h, we've got a number of commands here, or options. And so one of the things we're trying to do here is not be tied to Docker itself, because there's other container runtimes that we'd like to support as well. Podman is a big one of them. And so we have this runtime flag here that does default to Docker, but if you pass runtime podman, it'll use that all the same. And so the easiest path here is just to run Orchestrator init -u, which is auto update dependencies. And so I'll just run this. So this is pulling the image from GitLab org, GitLab Orchestrator for the project. So this is the first command you would run before starting the Orchestrator. Any commands from then on out will use this image, will be run inside this image. So you can see it successfully downloaded the dependencies. One other thing that we wanted to support here is offline usages, or at least workstations that don't have access to a Docker registry, or rather they'll have an image tarball. So I'll show off how that works. So just for demo purposes, I'm going to use just kind of a small image, so that Alpine version of Nginx. File name. So Docker save is creating a tarball of this image now, and you can see it now. It's in the CLI project. So if I don't want to automatically reach out to the Docker registry now, I can say Orchestrator Init, and then pass it the F flag, which is the image file flag, and then pass it this tarball file. And so now you can see that it loaded this image successfully, and now that will be used from then on. So we cover both the online and the offline use cases that way. So yeah, we've got a good amount of work to do yet on the CLI, but we've got our our CLI, our project structure in place. Again, just kind of following what the GitLab runner group did. We've got a command folder with the name of the project, and then a main file that just reaches out to the app object, which is defined in the internal folder of the CLI project here. And breaking it out this way has a number of benefits. Like number one, we end up with smaller source files. Like you could define everything in main, like your whole CLI application, but then you're going to end up with like several hundred lines of command declarations. And especially with the nested style of Go, it can quickly get pretty confusing about what's happening where. And of course, that leads to testing issues because it's hard to pick apart specific commands to test. And so instead, we have under commands, here's the init command. So we're defining the flags, and then we're running this manage dependencies function and passing it in the CLI context. And so that means we're able to unit test this manage dependencies function on its own without having to, load up the whole CLI object and parse through it. So that makes unit testing a lot easier. Okay. Well, that's all I have so far, since we only have the init command so far. Is there anything that I've missed or that you want to highlight, Mitch or Robert, about this?
I don't think I have anything. That was a great overview, Dustin.
Cool. Any comments, questions, concerns about this from anybody on the call?
So what's the next command that you think you'll add?
Do you know the answer to that, Mitch?
I think the next one in the architecture decision record is set and get. So setting and getting configuration.
Okay.
Parameters.
Yeah. So this will be a way for, we're working on figuring out a config file format for the orchestrator. It'll probably be just a YAML file where you specify your options, but this set and get will be a way to work with this file in a less error prone way. And so let's say you want to set the runtime in this config file. If you run orchestrator set runtime Docker or runtime podman, we'll be able to do some validation on that coming in. And so it'll make it, I don't want to say impossible, but very difficult for users to do the wrong thing, because if you put in a wrong option, it'll say something like, Docker 2 or some typo is not a supported runtime even before you write it to the file. So that's up next.
Gotcha, that sounds good. I like how snappy, I know it's not doing much yet, but it sure seems nice and quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, And of course, you know, the typical Go benefit here is that we can build this binary for any number of systems and architectures we want and not have to change the code. So that'll be great for supporting, you know, all different kinds of users. Okay, any other questions, comments on this? Crickets 1, crickets 2, crickets 3.
Thanks, Dotson.
Yep, thanks everyone.